Winterfell was quiet, too quiet for Ned Stark's liking. Snowflakes fell softly from the sky, covering the stone walls and courtyards in white. He stood at the window of his solar, looking down at the courtyard where Jon was training with Robb and Arya. His mind, however, was far away, back in King's Landing. A raven had come that morning. Another letter from the capital, another desperate cry from Lord Varys, Robert Baratheon. The man Ned once called his brother was losing his mind. It started small, drinking more than usual, shouting at his council, hunting recklessly. But over the past year, Robert's behavior had become darker, crueler. There were whispers of him having small folk executed for insulting his name. He had begun talking about cleansing the North of traitors, even though no one in the North had rebelled. Ned tried to ignore it for months. He told himself it was grief, that Robert never recovered after Lyanna's death. But now, and things had gone too far. The letter in Ned's hand was from Varys himself, and it chilled him to the bone. "Lord Stark," it read, "the king now believes you plot against him. He plans to send a host north. He speaks of burning Winterfell. You must act, or you and your family will perish." Ned gripped the edge of the window. His knuckles turned white. Burn Winterfell. He could still hear Robert's laughter from the old days. He remembered the man who had fought to avenge Lyanna, who had led a rebellion to free the realm from the Mad King. But now, the crown was mad again, and it wore Robert's head. Catelyn entered the room quietly. She saw the letter in his hand and the worry in his eyes. "Another bad one?" she asked. Ned gave her a slow nod. "He's sending men north. He thinks I mean to betray him." She walked closer and placed a hand on his arm. "What are you going to do?" He looked at her, truly looked at her. "If he comes for us, we must be ready." "You're not saying I am," he interrupted softly but firmly. "If Robert sends soldiers to burn the North, then the North must stand." Catelyn's face paled. "You would raise your banner against the king?" "I would raise it to protect our people. If he leaves me no choice." For days, Ned didn't sleep much. He sent ravens to the lords of the North, Karstark, Manderly, Glover, Umber. He told them to be ready, but not why. Not yet. He hoped it wouldn't come to war, but deep down, he knew it would. The next raven came a week later. This time, it was from the Wall. Jon had barely finished his letters when Maester Aemon sent it south with urgency. The message was short, but the meaning was clear. "The king's men have reached Castle Black, demanding Jon Snow be turned over. They claim he is a bastard plotting treason." Ned stood in the great hall, the letter in one hand, ice in the other. The hall was filled with bannermen. Robb stood beside him, only 17 but tall and strong. Ned looked around at the men he had called allies for years. "I have kept my peace," he said. "I served Robert faithfully. I rode beside him in war. But now he threatens my home. He threatens my son. He threatens all of you." Murmurs filled the room. "He would burn our fields, take our children." All for madness in his head. "That is not the king I once knew." Silence fell, and then Lord Greatjon Umber stepped forward, thundering his voice across the hall. "Then he is no king of mine." One by one, the other lords joined in. Swords were drawn. Words were spoken. The wolf had finally bared its teeth. Snow turned red outside. Winterfell, not from blood, not yet, but from the blazing banners of House Baratheon, carried by the first southern riders. A small group, just 20 men, had arrived at the gates. They wore golden antlers on black cloaks, and their leader, a cold-eyed knight named Sir Mervyn Trant, carried a royal scroll in one hand and a torch in the other. Ned watched them from the battlements. Robb stood beside him, jaw clenched tight, fingers resting on the hilt of his sword. Behind them, Maester Luwin looked uneasy. "He comes with words," said Luwin. "Let us hope they're not poisoned." "They're Robert's," Ned replied. "Which means they're drunk, dangerous, or both." The gates opened slowly. Sir Mervyn rode in like a man on a stage, dramatic and proud, smirking as though Winterfell were already ashes. Before the great hall, he unrolled the scroll and read aloud, voice booming, "Eddard Stark, you are hereby declared a traitor to the crown. You are accused of conspiracy, heresy, and sedition against King Robert Baratheon. First of his name, you are to be arrested and delivered to King's Landing immediately. Should you resist, you and your house shall face royal justice." He let the scroll drop dramatically. "And what if I refuse?" Ned asked, stepping forward slowly, voice cold. Sir Mervyn smiled. "Then your children die. Your bannermen are executed. Your name is erased from history." Silence filled the courtyard. Then, without a word, Ned turned and walked back up the steps of the great hall. A moment later, the great horn sounded from the tower, a long, deep wail that echoed across the land. It was the call for war. Robb, eyes burning, stepped forward. "Take their weapons. Chain them. Let them ride back to their mad king in shame." And so it began. Within days, the North had stirred like a sleeping giant finally woken. From Deepwood Motte to White Harbour, lords began raising their banners. The Casterly brought 1,000 spears. The Umbers sent fierce riders with great axes. Even the cautious House Manderley, always loyal to the crown, now stood behind the Starks. And Ned, he had never wanted this war. But Robert had forced it upon him. In the war room, maps lay stretched across long tables. Stones marked movements. Lines were drawn. Plans made. But Ned's heart weighed heavy. Have we become the rebels now? He asked Catelyn one night. She stood behind him, arms around his shoulders. "Only a fool would call you that." "You're not rebelling, Ned. You're protecting." He looked down at the map. One black piece marked King's Landing. Another moved up from Harrenhal. Reports said Robert had sent 3,000 men under Lord Royce to march north, and behind them, the whispers spoke of wildfire. Robert had threatened to use the very weapon Aerys had once hoarded. "Let them see fire," he had said, according to Varys. "If they won't bend, we'll burn every last wolf den." To Ned, those weren't just words. They were betrayal. The North rode under grey skies. At Moat Cailin, Robb Stark met the enemy for the first time. Still a boy in many eyes. But no one who saw him on the battlefield that day would say so again. He led from the front, sword flashing, cloak whipping in the wind. The Baratheon host, caught in the narrow swamp pass, found themselves trapped and picked apart by northern archers and pikemen. Sir Mervyn was captured, face pale with disbelief. "The king will hang you all," he spat, blood leaking from his lips. Robb leaned close. "The king will never see the North again." The victory was swift but costly. Over 100 good men died. Some were burned alive when Baratheon men threw torches into the bog to set fire around them. And worst of all, a raven had come to Winterfell. It bore the royal seal and a warning. "Your daughter Sansa is now a guest of the crown. Should your treason continue, she will pay your debt." Ned read the letter alone, in the darkness of his solar. His hand shook. First threats, then war, now hostages. Robert had taken his daughter. It was no longer about pride, no longer just honor. Now it was personal. He dropped the letter into the fireplace and watched it burn. Then he stood and called for his sword. If Robert Baratheon wanted war, then war he would have, and the wolf would howl louder than ever before. The fire in the hearth crackled, but it didn't warm Ned Stark. He sat at the long table in Winterfell's war room. The map of the realm rolled out before him, smeared with blood from a wounded rider who had brought grim news just hours earlier. King Robert had done the unthinkable. He had ordered the burning of Lord Howland Reed's lands in the Neck. Swamp villages, fishing camps, children's huts, all gone. Torched by soldiers carrying the stag's banner. Screaming women, butchered elders, whole families drowned or cut down trying to flee, and all of it, according to survivors, was done in the name of royal justice. Ned looked across the table at his son. Robb's eyes were stormy, lips tight, jaw clenched so hard it looked like it might break. "They're not soldiers," Robb muttered. "They're butchers, madmen. They don't serve a king. They serve a demon in a crown." Ned didn't disagree. He still remembered the day Robert had stood victorious after the Battle of the Trident. His warhammer slick with Rhaegar's blood, roaring like a god. He had once been a lion-hearted friend, but now that lion's heart had turned black, rotten. "Robert was my brother," Ned said quietly, more to himself than anyone. "But he's not the man I followed. He's become what we fought against." At that, Maester Luwin nodded gravely. "Aerys Targaryen burned people alive. Now Robert does the same. Outside, the snow was melting early this year, but it wasn't spring. It was the fire riding north." Ned stood up slowly, heavily. His eyes found the Mormont shield on the wall. "Send word to the mountain clans," he ordered. "Call the Glovers, the Hornwoods, the Boltons. We march." In the south, word of rebellion had lit the court on fire. Robert Baratheon stood in the Red Keep's throne room, but he looked more like a caged animal than a king. He paced violently, slamming his goblet against the stone floor. "Wine spilled everywhere. He was my friend," Robert roared. "Ned Stark, my brother in arms. And now he dares raise his banners against me? Him!" The courtiers and lords stood frozen. No one dared speak. Only Cersei Lannister sat calmly on her gilded chair, lips curved in a cold smile. "Perhaps," she said smoothly, "you were too soft with the Starks all along." Robert's head snapped toward her. "Soft? I spared him. I gave him the North. I trusted him." She stood up slowly, her eyes sharp like daggers. "And in return he plots against you. Tell me, Your Grace, what do you plan to do about your darling daughter Sansa?" Robert's fury flickered. "She's innocent," he growled. A child with Stark blood. "Do you think the wolf pup hasn't sent her letters?" Cersei stepped closer, her voice honeyed with poison. "She's a weapon now, and if you don't use her first, the Starks will." The king was silent for a long time. Then finally he whispered, "Bring her to the dungeons. No harm yet, but let the wolf know we have teeth." And so Sansa Stark was dragged from her soft chambers and locked away beneath the Red Keep, surrounded by rats and shadows, her sobs echoing through the stone halls. Back in the north, Ned read the message brought by a dying crow. Only 4 words: "Your daughter is taken." He didn't shout, he didn't curse, he simply stared out into the snow, and a different kind of silence filled the room, a dangerous one, the kind that comes before a storm breaks. Catelyn tried to speak, but her words faltered. Robb stepped forward. "Father, let me ride. Let me take her back." "No," Ned said, calm but firm. "We don't ride to King's Landing." "Then what do? We bring King's Landing to its knees." And so the Northern Army marched south, not just men, but rage, pride, and pain. Every man who had lost a family member in the neck joined them. Every house that feared the fire added swords. From Bear Island to the Dreadfort, from the Last Hearth to White Harbor, the North united, not just behind Ned Stark, but behind a cause, no longer just a defense. Now it was revenge. They crossed the neck under moonlight, avoided the main roads, and then, just before dawn, struck like wolves from the trees. The first target, a Baratheon supply camp near Harrenhal. They burned it to the ground, not a single survivor, and left behind, nailed to a blackened tree, was a message carved in the flesh of a dead knight. "You took our daughter. Now we take your kingdom." Cersei Lannister watched the flames dance in the hearth like they were old friends. In her hand was a goblet of arbor gold, but she hadn't touched it. Her eyes were fixed on the fire, her mind racing faster than wildfire. "Robert has lost the realm," she said coldly to her brother Jaime, who leaned lazily against the wall polishing his golden armor. "The North is rising. The Riverlands will stir next. He sits on a throne of ashes and doesn't even realize it." Jaime shrugged. "We still hold King's Landing, and the gold flows. What more do you need?" "I need a king," she hissed, "not a drunk roaring about ghosts and wolves. He's no better than Aerys." She stood, turning to face her twin. "It's time we stop waiting for Robert to bring ruin. We need to control what's left before it's all gone." Jaime frowned. "And how do you propose we do that?" She leaned closer, her voice a whisper. "We let the wolf come, and when Robert begs for help, we make him pay for it, far from the Red Keep at River Run." Another storm brewed. Catelyn Stark stood before her father's bed, Lord Hoster Tully wheezing in pain. "The North has risen," she told her brother Edmure. "But we can't stand alone. The Riverlands must join us." Edmure looked torn, pacing the room. "We swore fealty to the crown," he said. "Even if Robert is mad, Rebelling is no small thing. Catelyn's voice turned sharp. They took Sansa. They burned the neck. Would you wait until they burned the trident too? Her brother hesitated. Hoster near death coughed and raised a trembling hand. Ned Stark is an honourable man, the old lord rasped. And Robert? Robert is lost. Stand with the North, Edmure, or you'll kneel to fire. That night, the banners of House Tully were raised for the first time in 20 years, not in honour of the crown, but beside the direwolf of the North. Meanwhile, deep in the south, Stannis Baratheon stood at the walls of Dragonstone, reading the Raven's message with dead-cold eyes. Robert had descended into madness. Tyrants and mad kings belonged in the past. Yet here they were again, dressed in antlers instead of dragons. He turned to his wife Selyse, who watched him with wide, eager eyes. "This is your chance," she said softly. "The gods have sent you a sign." Stannis said nothing. He turned back toward the sea, his jaw clenched. He had no love for Ned Stark, but he had no love for Robert either, not anymore. And as the stars shifted in the sky, a red priestess from the east whispered to Stannis of destiny, of flames and of kingship shaped by fire and blood. In the north, Ned marched south with an army of 25,000 men, wolves on their banners, vengeance in their hearts. Every step brought them closer to war. And then the letter came, written in Lannister gold, signed not by Robert, but by Queen Cersei. "Let us meet," it said. "There may yet be peace if we speak before more blood is spilled." "You have my word. Your daughter lives," Robb raged. "It's a trap. The Lannisters play games while we march for justice." But Ned saw deeper. Cersei didn't want a meeting. She wanted to stall, still. Time bought them something valuable, more allies. News came from the Vale. Lisa Arryn, Cat's sister, had refused to send men, but her son, young Lord Robert, had become terrified of the king. "He wants to throw people through the moon door," he sobbed to his mother, "just like the bad men in my dreams." Fear had turned Lysa cautious, but it also kept her door open. If the Vale didn't fight with them yet, they at least wouldn't fight against them. And then came the most unexpected message of all, from Dorne. A raven bearing the sun and spear arrived in Robb's camp. Oberyn Martell's words were blunt. "The king you kneel to killed my sister and her children. If you wish to see fire rain on the Lannisters, then let us talk." Robb's jaw dropped. "Dorne with us?" Ned simply nodded. "The realm is cracking. The lions are feeding on the rot, and the snakes are crawling out of the sand." In King's Landing, Robert sat alone in the throne room, staring at his warhammer. Drunk again, sweating, twitching, he muttered to himself about wolves, dragons, fire, ghosts, betrayal. He gripped the warhammer tightly, as if afraid it might leave him too. Then suddenly he looked up, eyes wild, mouth trembling. "Bring me the girl," he whispered. The guards hesitated. "Your Grace?" "Bring me Sansa Stark," he said louder. "Bring her. I'll have the wolf's head, or hers." The war had begun with letters and banners. Now it would be fought with fire, steel and blood. The north had risen, the south was unraveling, and somewhere in between, a girl sat in a dungeon, praying for someone to come before it was too late. The Red Keep had never felt colder, even with the heat of summer still hanging over King's Landing. The air inside the throne room was tense, heavy, like a corpse waiting to rot. The silence was loud. No musicians played. No courtiers laughed. The great windows were shut tight. The Iron Throne stood like a beast made of knives, casting long shadows, and King Robert Baratheon sat slumped on it, bloated, sweating, muttering to himself, madder than any Targaryen had ever been. He hadn't bathed in days. His once golden hair was greying and greasy. His robe smelled of wine and filth. His crown had slid slightly crooked on his head, but no one dared fix it. Sir Barristan Selmy stood silently at the base of the throne, armoured and still. Even he, the most loyal of Kingsguard, had begun to question what he was protecting. Robert's eyes flickered open. "Where is she?" he slurred. One of the guards stepped forward hesitantly. The girl, Your Grace, Sansa Stark?" Robert nodded, his hand trembling. Bring her. Now. Down in the black cells, Sansa Stark sat on a cold stone floor, arms wrapped around her knees. She had cried every tear she had in her. Now she just sat hollow, like a bird that had forgotten how to sing. She heard footsteps, iron boots, keys jangling. She stood quickly, panic rising in her throat. 2 gold cloaks opened the cell door. "The king wants you," one said, not unkindly. "Come." They didn't shackle her this time. They didn't have to. She walked between them like a ghost, heart pounding louder than her steps. Every hallway reminded her of home. Every guard reminded her she would never see it again. When she entered the throne room, she gasped. She barely recognized Robert. His eyes were red, his lips cracked, and his warhammer was lying across his lap like a symbol of death. "There she is," he rasped. "The little wolf cub." Sansa fell to her knees. "Please, your grace, I've done nothing wrong." Robert leaned forward. "But your father has." He stood suddenly, stumbling. His warhammer fell to the ground with a clang that echoed through the hall. He looked down at her, eyes swimming with rage and grief and some twisted sense of justice. "Your father betrayed me, the man I bled with, the man I called brother. Now he marches on my throne." He raised a shaking hand. "And you are his blood." The guards stepped forward. Sansa shut her eyes, but the blow never came. A voice cut through the chamber like a sword. "That's enough." It was Queen Cersei. She walked forward slowly, her gown flowing like liquid gold. Her face was unreadable, cold, controlled. Robert turned, snarling. "This is my throne. I do as I wish." "Not anymore," Cersei said quietly. "You've lost the realm." Robert blinked, confused. Then he saw the swords. Half the gold cloaks had moved, swords drawn, turned toward him. He looked to Ser Barristan for help, but the old knight stood still, eyes low, ashamed. "You think you can take it from me?" Robert roared. "I don't have to," Cersei said calmly. "You already gave it away." He lunged forward, reaching for his hammer. Jaime Lannister stepped from the shadows and ran him through. The room fell still. The mighty Robert Baratheon gasped, stumbled, back and collapsed beside the Iron Throne. Not on it, not above it, but beneath it, blood pouring from his mouth. And just like that, the king was dead. In the north, Ned Stark held the Raven Scroll with trembling hands. Robert Baratheon is dead. Cersei claims the crown for her son, Joffrey. Your daughter remains alive for now, but she is our guest, not your daughter. It was signed in the Lannister lion's name. Ned's knuckles turned white. "Traitors," he whispered. "They've killed him. They've stolen the crown." But something else burned in his gut. Guilt. Despite Robert's madness, they had been brothers once. And somewhere deep down, Ned had hoped that war could end with Robert's fall, not his death. Now, with Joffrey on the throne and Cersei in control, there was no turning back, no peace, no retreat, only fire. Robb stepped beside him. "They've crossed the line, Father." "They've burned it," Ned said. He turned to the table where the map of Westeros lay marked with swords and blood. "Send riders to the Vale. Call the Martells to battle, and find me the Targaryen girl in the east. If they want fire..." He picked up his sword. "We'll give them a dragon's worth." The North no longer fought Robert Baratheon. They now fought something worse. A crown worn by a lion cub, a realm ruled by a queen of poison. And far across the sea, whispers of a silver-haired dragon queen began to stir. Ravens flew like black arrows across the sky. Every castle, every keep, every sworn house of Westeros had received the same message within days. King Robert Baratheon is dead. Joffrey Baratheon sits the Iron Throne. All those who bend the knee shall be spared. All those who rise shall be broken. But in the north, Ned Stark didn't bend. He rose. Winterfell's courtyard echoed with steel as blacksmiths hammered swords. Women stitched new banners, and boys too young for war learned how to string a bow. The North hadn't been this alive in decades, But what stirred them now wasn't glory. It was vengeance. Inside the great hall, Ned addressed his bannermen, the room lit with torches and voices crackling with tension. They took my daughter, they butchered our people, they crowned a boy with Lannister blood and called him king. And they think the North will kneel? A chorus of growls and curses filled the air. Lord Greatjon Umber slammed his axe into the table. "Let the lions come! We'll send their cub's head back in a box." "Let them," Ned said, his voice calm but dangerous. "Because this time, we don't ride to King's Landing for justice. We ride to end their line." He turned to Robb, now hardened by the road and soaked in battlefield experience. "You'll lead the first strike. Ride fast. Strike Casterly Rock while their eyes stay on the throne." Robb's eyes gleamed. "And if we find Lannisters there?" Ned didn't blink. "Bury them." Far across Westeros, Cersei Lannister sat beside the Iron Throne like a serpent in silk. Joffrey played with the crown in his lap like it was a toy, swinging his feet while knights bowed and nobles lied through their teeth. He was just a boy, with sharp words and small hands. But the court already feared him more than they ever feared Robert, because Joffrey didn't get drunk. He didn't forget. He remembered every insult, every name, every face, and Cersei made sure those memories turned into punishments. "Mother," Joffrey said one morning, "can I hang someone today?" Cersei smiled coldly. "Wait until the raven arrives. Then you can choose anyone who defies it." And when the raven did arrive, covered in the northern sigil of the direwolf, Joffrey tore the scroll open himself and read aloud, "House Stark does not recognize the boy king on the Iron Throne. Winter is coming, and we carry fire with it." The throne room froze. Cersei read it next, and smiled. So be it. She turned to her twin brother Jaime, lounging nearby, polishing his golden sword. "Burn the Riverlands. Crush the North's food supply. Bleed them on the march before they ever reach the gates." "And if they reach the gates?" Jaime asked. Cersei stood. "Then we'll paint King's Landing red." In the Riverlands, the first flames had already begun. Lannister raiders led. By Sir Gregor Clegane, the Mountain moved like beasts through the Tullylands. Villages were torched, wells poisoned, and children slaughtered as warnings. It wasn't a battle. It was terror. Sir Edmure Tully watched the sky from the walls of Riverrun. Smoke choked the horizon. Refugees poured into the gates, telling horror stories. And behind them, the enemy marched. They needed help, and help came with the howling of wolves. Robb Stark rode hard, his direwolf Grey Wind by his side, leading 10,000 Northmen across the Twins, through the forests, into the flames. He didn't wait for orders. He didn't ask permission. He struck the Lannisters like thunder. The Battle of the Burning Fields was not noble, not fair. It was savage. Northern spears punched through golden armor, axes cut through banners. Grey Wind tore a knight's throat out before the man even drew his sword. And Robb, he fought like his house's words were carved into his bones. When the smoke cleared, the North stood taller, and behind them they left a message nailed to a charred tree, for Sansa, for the North, for vengeance. But while men bled, on Westeros soil across the narrow sea, another storm brewed, and this one wore silver. In the heat of the Red Waste, Daenerys Targaryen sat beneath a crumbling ruin, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Her dragons, still small but growing, rested near her, their bellies full of meat, their wings stretching longer each week. Ser Jorah approached with a waterskin and news. "The king is dead," he said. "Robert Baratheon." Dany blinked. "Then who sits the throne?" "His son. A Lannister puppet. The realm is in chaos." Daenerys stared at the sky. She saw opportunity in the stars. She saw a kingdom breaking, a throne cracking, and a future wide open. "Then it's time," she said softly, fire burning in her voice. "Let the lions fight the wolves. We'll bring the dragons last, and take the ashes for ourselves." Back in the North, Ned Stark stood atop a snowy ridge, watching the horizon. He wasn't the same man who left King's Landing with hope in his heart. He was harder now, colder, but he was ready. "If they want war," he whispered, "they'll learn what happens when a wolf stops guarding and starts hunting." The Golden Lion had always stood proud atop Casterly Rock. For centuries, the seat of House Lannister had loomed over the Western Sea, unbroken, unreachable, untouched by any enemy, until now. Smoke curled along the cliffs, and the sky above the rock had turned black. Robb Stark stood on the ridge overlooking the fortress, cloak whipping in the wind, grey wind growling beside him. "They said the rock could never fall," Robb muttered. "And now we make it bleed," said Lord Rickard Karstark, his voice like gravel. The northern host had travelled fast and hard, splitting from the main army weeks earlier to catch the west off guard. They'd expected resistance, but what they found was silence. No Lannister banners on the outer roads, no patrols, no horns, only smoke from the distant fishing villages, and the stench of betrayal. Robb didn't like it. "This feels wrong," he whispered, but they had come too far to turn back. At dawn, the attack began. The siege of Casterly Rock wasn't a battle, it was a reckoning. Northern battering rams thundered against the gates. Siege towers rolled forward under volleys of flaming arrows. Grey wind leapt from wall to wall, tearing through guards like cloth. The outer defences fell by noon, and what the north found inside wasn't strength. It was fear. The rock was nearly empty, its defenders thin, its armories half-stocked. Civilians screamed and fled through tunnels, while frightened knights surrendered without a fight. It didn't make sense, and then Robb saw the truth. In the main hall, upon a blood-soaked carpet, lay the body of Kevan Lannister, stabbed in the chest, armor untouched. Scrawled above him in blood, painted across the lion's banner, were 3 words: "The debt begins." Back in King's Landing, Cersei Lannister read the report with trembling hands. Casterly Rock has fallen. Kevan is dead. The Stark boy rules the West. Her fingernails dug into her palm so hard they bled. "They were supposed to defend it," she hissed. "They were Lannisters." Varys, ever quiet, ever present, stepped forward. "It seems not all lions are loyal. The small folk in the West are starving, Your Grace. They were taxed, stripped, and bled dry for years." Robb Stark arrived with bread, not fire. Cersei glared at him. "And now they love him. They fear him. Which is better?" She stormed across the room. "Then let the Riverlands burn. Let Winterfell freeze. Let them all die. I will still have the throne." But even as she said it, her walls were cracking. The Vale refused to join her. Dorne whispered of Targaryens. The Reach waited in silence, watching, weighing their gold. And now the West, her own blood, had turned to the wolf. The Queen turned to Jaime, her voice low. "I want Robb Stark dead." Jaime gave her a long, thoughtful look. "And what if we can't kill the wolf?" She didn't blink. "Then we'll skin the cubs." One by one, in River Run, Edmure Tully welcomed the news of Casterly Rock's fall with open arms. But the celebration didn't last long. Reports from the south were worse than anyone feared. Sir Gregor Clegane. The Mountain had taken Harrenhal, and worse. He had help from Roose Bolton. The man had vanished from the northern host weeks ago. Some believed he had ridden home. Others thought him scouting, but now he sat at Harrenhal beside the mountain. Flayed men hung from the towers, his banner flying alongside the lion. Ned Stark read the letter with a quiet, boiling fury. Roose had betrayed them. "I should have known," he muttered. He always moved in silence, like a man waiting to stab the dark. Robb clenched his fists. "Let me take him. Let me burn Harrenhal." "No," Ned said. "Let him rot there. He's not the Mountain. He's a shadow." Then he turned to Maester Luwin. "Send word to the Dreadfort. Tell the bastard of Bolton, if he still calls himself a Stark bannerman, it's time to prove it." Far across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen stood before her Khalasar, her silver hair blowing wild in the desert wind. The dragons were growing faster now. Drogon had started to fly. The heat of their breath could melt iron, And now new ships had docked at the coast, ships bearing banners with no crown. But a wolf and a trout, two exiled knights, climbed the dunes toward her. "You are the rightful queen," the older one said. "Westeros bleeds. They'll kneel when they see your fire." Dany didn't smile. She looked west. "I don't want them to kneel," she said. "I want them to burn." In the black of night, a raven arrived at Winterfell. Bran Stark took the scroll and read it slowly. His eyes wide, he saw visions with every word: a throne of knives, a lion drowned in shadow, a wolf walking through flame, and one line echoed louder than the rest: "The Targaryens are coming. Choose your dragon or be eaten by it." The game had changed. The rock had fallen. The riverlands bled. The wolves were loose, but fire had just entered the board. And soon it wouldn't be kings who died. It would be kingdoms. The sky above King's Landing was red before dawn, but it wasn't the sun. It was fire. The bells of the Great Sept rang wildly, not in celebration but in panic. Smoke rose from the harbor. Civilians flooded the streets, clutching children and screaming names. Some cried out for the gods, others cried out for mercy, but mercy wasn't coming. Not from the north, not from the east, and not from above. 3 days earlier, the first dragon had flown over Westeros Drogon, black as ash and twice as fast as any raven, cast a shadow across the Stormlands before scorching a Lannister garrison to cinders. No warning, no parley, no survivors. From his corpse-covered perch, Daenerys Targaryen declared her arrival. "I am the storm they feared. I am fire reborn. I'm not here to rule. I'm here to end what they began." And the realm trembled. Ned Stark stood at the gates of King's Landing, his army behind him, banners flapping like thunder. Robb was at his side, his armor dulled from weeks of war, but his eyes still sharp. They had marched for justice, but justice had died the day Sansa was taken. Today was about vengeance. A rider approached, one of Varys's birds. He handed Ned a scroll sealed with dragon wax. "The Dragon Queen is close," the letter read. "You can wait, or strike first." "But she won't wait for long." Robb stepped forward. "She burns cities. Do we trust her?" "We don't trust dragons," Ned said. "But we trust wolves." He turned to his men. "We strike at dawn, before the lioness buries herself in wildfire. Inside the Red Keep." Cersei stood in the throne room, crown on her head, wine in hand, lips red with defiance. "They've come," she whispered, eyes fixed on the Iron Throne. "All of them." Ser Jaime stood beside her, weary, pale, torn. "Then run," he said. "Take the ship. Take Joffrey, go. It's not too late." Cersei laughed bitterly. "It's always been too late." She turned to her son, now seated on the throne like a child playing with knives. Joffrey grinned. "Let them come. I want to see a dragon burn." They did. Drogon swept across the walls of the city, his roar louder than the bells, his fire washing over towers and battlements. Golden Company soldiers turned to ash in seconds. Ballistas fired and missed. Fleets burned in the bay, and then the north attacked. Ned Stark's army stormed the gates as the city's defenses collapsed in chaos. Robb led the charge, grey wind leaping through smoke and screams. The small folk ran, some toward the Starks, others toward the fire. The lion's den was falling. Cersei fled down secret tunnels with Joffrey, Jaime at her side. But not all tunnels lead to safety. At the Sept they found themselves trapped, smoke above, soldiers below, and then the Dragon Queen arrived. Daenerys descended from the sky atop Drogon, her silver hair shining, her eyes full of old fire and fresh fury. Ser Jorah rode behind her, sword drawn. "Cersei Lannister," she said, stepping onto the cracked marble floor of the Sept. "You burned my family. You took the throne from blood, and now you think you can hold it with wine and whispers." Cersei stared at her, jaw clenched. "I will never kneel, then burn." But Ned Stark arrived before the fire, sword in hand. Voice low, "No," he said. "This is not justice. This is slaughter." Dany turned to him, flame in her breath. "You came to destroy the throne." "I came to end the war," Ned replied. "Not become what we fought." The room held its breath. Then Joffrey, snarling, reached for his sword, but Jaime moved first and stabbed his own son in the chest. Silence. Cersei collapsed beside the body, screaming. Dany looked at Ned and sheathed her blade. "This city is yours," she said, "but the realm will be mine." A week later, the Iron Throne was gone, melted. Drogon had torched it under Daenerys' command. No more kings built from steel and lies. No more crowns for the Lannisters. No more thrones made of blades. Joffrey was buried in silence. Cersei was sent into exile. Jaime vanished into the snow, never to be seen again. And Sansa Stark. She walked free, bruised but unbroken. Her father embraced her beneath the weirwood tree in the Godswood, and no war, no fire, no throne could ever take that from them. The realm was broken, but from its ruins, something new began. Daenerys sailed south to unite the Reach and Dawn behind a new code. No more kings or queens by blood, only leaders chosen by the people. Ned returned to Winterfell with his children and crowned Robb Stark as Warden of the North. Not a king, but a protector, the way it always should have been. Bran dreamed of ravens flying west. Arya sharpened her blade and looked east, and Jon Snow stood at the wall, watching the wind blow northward, a quiet guardian in a world that had nearly burned. No songs would be sung of Robert's reign, no glory written of Joffrey's crown, but whispers would remain of the day the North remembered. The dragons returned, and the Iron Throne died in fire, and the world at last began again.